What the Mum podcast. My name is Maria Newman and I will be your host. Every mum to be knows that as soon as she becomes a mum, her world will change forever. Everyone is keen to give you advice based on their own experiences. Other mums delight in sharing their horror stories so that new mums are better prepared for what might happen. The lack of sleep, feeling exhausted most of the time, living in bodies with even more wobbly bits and never having any privacy. But everyone's story is unique. Everyone's experience is personal. On this podcast, I will be sharing real stories told by mums like you and I about their experience of motherhood and how life changes when you become a mum. This podcast is about showing you that you're not alone. We may not be in the same boat, but we are experiencing a similar storm. I hope these stories will inspire you to do what you want, be who you want to be. Anything is possible if you really want it and if it is really important to you. If you want to find out more about me and who I am, check out my website, mummyinabreak.co.uk. However, for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast episode. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. During this podcast series, I will be interviewing 6 awesome women who will be sharing with us their mum stories. My guest today is Charlie, author of Our Altered Life, and who I recently connected with on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining me today, Charlie.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Me too. I'm always excited to talk to people. I love just finding out about people. So, Charlie, first of all, tell us a bit about yourself so we can get a sense of who you are.
Okay, so I am the mum of 17-year-old twins, Oliver and Harry. I had a very typical pregnancy, but Harry was born with a very rare craniofacial condition, which effectively meant he'd got half a face that had developed, and he later on went on to be diagnosed with autism. So although he's 17, he functions around about 5 or 6 now. I was a full-time primary school teacher when the boys were born. I had to leave that career because of my caring responsibilities, and I do teach now currently, just 2 days a week in a local high school because it's a little bit different in a high school than a primary school here in the UK. I'm not sure where your listeners are. So when I wasn't working, I wrote my book and published that, which became an Amazon bestseller, which was amazing. And I set up my social media accounts, Our Altered Life, founded a charity called More Than a Face, so that I could go out and educate children and young people on facial disfigurement and visible difference, and just generally like keeping myself busy.
Mums like to keep themselves busy, whether we do it intentionally or not. We are generally busy, aren't we?
Yes, most definitely.
So tell me, what is it like being a mum, being in your world? How do you feel? What do you go through? What are the anxieties that you have? Share with us, what is it like being Charlie the mum?
Yeah, I think it's, very much like parenting in general. It's exhausting and it's incredible. But I think the difference when you've got a child with additional needs is that the highs are super high, the lows are incredibly low, and there's only a select few people, sometimes you're not even lucky enough to have that truly understand what it feels like to be struggling in the way that you are, and also to be celebrating those little wins that other people might just take for granted. So recently Harry ate cherries for the first time, and that was a big deal for us. He's struggled with food for years, and yet if I'd have told any of my other friends, they'd have been a bit like, okay, right, he's eating cherries, that's brilliant. But my other friends with special needs children, they completely understand the significance. So it can be very lonely, it can be very exhausting and frustrating because there's lots of fighting that goes on when you've got a child with additional needs with local authority, healthcare, education, but it's also very, very magical, and it's a real privilege.
To talk to me more about, I want to rewind it a little bit. I'm going to say I was lucky enough to have one child at a time, because we know every child is different, every mum is different. You don't really know how you're going to be until your baby or babies come along. So, but for you had two things to deal with. The first one is you've got two babies at the same time.
Yep.
You haven't had babies before, so this is your first experience. It's not like you can go on your previous experience. And then you're having to deal with a child with special needs as well as a child without.
Yes.
So that's a lot to deal with when you're going from not being a mum to all of a sudden being a mum. So
Yes.
talk to me about, some of the things that must have been going on for you in your brain that you either decided to share with people or you didn't.
Mm.
And how did you manage?
Yeah. I mean, crikey, I could talk to you all day about just that question. But initially, I didn't tell anybody anything. I just painted this smile on my face, which I now call the lie we wear. And I think all mums are used to that, when you've had sleepless nights and you're wrestling with 101 priorities and people ask how you are, and you say, oh, I'm fine, when you're just crumbling on the inside. So I didn't tell people for a long time how I felt. It was only when I reached rock bottom when my boys were actually 6 and I was diagnosed with depression that I started to open up. And reflecting on the boys' birth, I'd also had an emergency cesarean section. The boys were only 32 weeks, so they were £3.9. So as you've just described, all of that plus premature babies, plus healing from a major operation, my head was coming off. And on top of that, I felt incredible guilt. I felt massive waves of grief for this life that I'd planned and taken for granted as I was carrying these two babies and planning their future and imagining what adventures they'd have. And all of a sudden that was ripped away from me. And I think mums in my situation, there's a mum before you, or the mum you imagined you were going to be. And then you get this diagnosis and everything flips on its head and you're a different mum on a different journey. And that was incredibly difficult to deal with. But what helped me was sharing that. So the book is very raw, very honest. I talk about the fact that I didn't know if I was going to be able to bond with a child like Harry, whether I could look at him, let alone love him and raise him. I didn't know that if I had it in me to be the mum he needed. So yeah, I just got a lot of comfort from sharing that. And then when mums reached out to me, I kind of realised that other people needed to hear this as well, that I wasn't the only one battling with this silently. And I guess that's where I've got my strength from, is from knowing that there are other mums that need to hear my story.
And you talking about how you went through the grief of sort of saying goodbye to the life that you thought you had. It's not the first time I've heard that from mums who have imagined this life where everything, and excuse me when I use these words, and feel free to tell me to use different ones, but where you imagine a life that seems normal,
Yeah,
and where everybody is how you expect an individual to be, to then coming to terms with life is going to be different.
sure. Sure, it's strange because my husband at the time, I'm on to husband number 2 now. I collect husbands, but my boy's dad, like Harry was a matter of hours old, and the paediatrician told him the news, and his first question was, "Will he ever drive?" And you're literally like, "Wow, okay, and will I play football with him? Will he ever play football with me?" And so I just think the enormity of losing that future is just massive, and it's definitely not something that people talk about a lot, because I get called out quite a bit on social media for talking about grief, and they'll say, what if your child heard this and you were saying that you were grieving? And my argument is, you can still grieve for the life you didn't have and absolutely love the children that you have. You can still feel incredibly lost and sad about the mum you're never going to be, and completely own it and boss it as the mum you are. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can experience those together. And I think it's really important that we give that a voice.
I totally agree with you. And I think that we have to have the courage to feel how we feel and to allow those emotions to be expressed. And it's not personal. You're not saying anything to your son and saying, this is all about you, because it's not actually about him.
No.
Your grief is your grief. It's something that you need to deal with. It's something that you need to overcome. And if you haven't got that opportunity, like with anybody who who is dealing with grief, if we don't give ourselves the opportunity to express it, to deal with it, then what happens? We just bottle it up. And at some point, it's gonna come out. So it's better to express it when you're ready, in the here and now, rather than push those feelings down and say, well, no, I can't, I'm not allowed to feel like this, I've got to, like you said, the lie we wear. I love that saying. I think it's a brilliant way of describing it. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to express it, and it's got nothing to do with anybody else. It doesn't say anything about anybody else. It's you, like you say, owning it and dealing with it, so that you then can be the mum you want to be to your boys, whatever that means.
100%. And I think that in itself is a journey, because I look back now and I see photographs of Harry, and he was such a beautiful baby. The one eye that he had is huge, twinkly blue, full of mischief. Everything that he is now as a young man, was encapsulated in that beautiful little sparkly eye. But I really struggled to look at him, and it wasn't. And at the time, I just thought, well, that makes me a bad mother because I can't even look at my own child. But what it was, I was a massive perfectionist before I had my boys. Everything I did really well. And I made people proud. If you cut me through the middle, I'd have said, like a stick of rock, make people proud. That's your mantra. And so looking at Harry, he symbolized everything that I saw in failure in myself. And so you're completely right. It was nothing to do with Harry and everything to do with the internal struggles that I was going through. But I think it takes a level of self-awareness to recognize that. And when you're in the thick of it, you don't always, you just blame yourself. And so you've got guilt, and then you've got shame. And then you've got all those other layers that just build and build and build. So yeah, it's definitely really important to give that a voice, as we say.
So tell me, how did life change when you became a mum? Because how my life changed. I can't speak now. How my life changed when I became a mum is, I'm going to say, not as significant as how life changed for you. Because as we said, you had twins, and then and one of your twins obviously has special needs. So yours is like magnified.
Yeah, and you're completely right. And we went from being a couple to a family of four overnight. It was a huge jump. So that in itself was tricky to navigate. The boys didn't sleep, so we were exhausted a lot of the time. Harry didn't feed well, so he had to be checked every 20 minutes, 24 hours a day. So my husband and I took it in shifts, 3-hour shifts, to keep an eye on him. And then you've got the logistics of caring for two babies. I remember once we went out shopping for the day, and it was like a military operation to take everything with us. And then we got there and realised we'd left the milk at home. So we didn't even get out the car. We just turned around and came straight back home again. So it was a real and I was only 26, which I think is still quite young, really, to be dealing with so much. And then so you've just got the typical twin life, which was chaotic and hectic and wonderful, but exhausting. And then I'd got the additional needs issue. So I'd got umpteen professionals that were necessary, but really unwanted in my life. I didn't want, a physiotherapist to come and see us. I didn't want the OT to come and visit all the time. I didn't, but I needed them. And in time, they became part of our journey, and really part of the fabric of who Harry is now. But back then, it was just this stampede of people that kept coming into our lives, as we were trying to deal with everything anyway. So yeah, I would say it was a definite significant change becoming a mum.
So looking back on your journey of 17 years, what has been your biggest high?
Wow. Oh, okay. Great question. I think, there's a few answers to that one. The book is definitely one of my biggest achievements behind having my boys, just because I didn't know whether people would like it or not, or if anybody would ever buy a copy, and I knew I was never going to make a lot of money through the book, but I wanted to make a difference, as the teacher in me.
Mm-hmm.
That would be under make people proud and make a difference. So the book is 100% up there. And I think as I've got older, the highs have come in little bursts, and that's always been when I've been able to break down barriers with children looking at Harry, and they'll point or stare or cry or run off or whisper, and I'll call them over and introduce them to Harry, and they'll ask loads of questions, and then they'll either run away or they'll stick around and play with him and talk to him. So that's almost like the tiny little highs that have kept me going over the years. Yeah, it's hard to say what's one high actually, but I would definitely say the book for a big significant, and then those little moments of sort of victory winning over the young hearts and minds.
And do you know what? That's a great message for all of us in life, I think, because we can become too fixated on trying to have these massive moments. Whereas actually, if we're grateful and acknowledge all the little moments, they're just like let's call it like a snowball that you start to create, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they become massive. So I think that is a great message for everybody who is listening and watching this. Don't focus on the massive achievements. Focus on those small achievements, because actually there's going to be more of them. And you can do your happy dance when that happens as well, and really like relish in those moments.
Yes, it definitely is about finding the wins, because life as a parent is hard. And so sometimes at the end of the day, it's really easy. And I think as mums, we're great at this, looking back and beating ourselves up. And we don't ever give ourselves a pat on the back. So I think it's really important that at the end of each day that we reflect and we just go, okay, so that didn't go particularly well, but you know what, this did. And at least I'm up and I'm showered and I fed them and nobody died today. And it's a good day in the household, So celebrating those little wins, I think, is really, really important.
So I know we've talked already about the challenges in your life, but I'm going to ask you, just in general terms, what is the most challenging thing, do you think, about being a mum?
I think it's just meeting everybody's needs at the expense of your own a lot of the time. I think that's a real challenge for everybody, that loss of identity, that who am I now and where do I fit in this pecking order when everybody else needs a piece of me. I think it's really difficult to be Charlie or to be Maria or to be whoever we were before children when little bits are taken up by other people. I think that's a real challenge for every mum.
And it's an ongoing theme that my clients actually talk to me about, where who am I now? I feel like I'm the glue that keeps the family together, and it's all this pressure actually that we put on ourselves that nobody else is putting on us. I hate to say this, but unfortunately we put the pressure on ourselves because we assume that no one else will step in and do what we do. And I say to clients, you are the same person, you're just living a different chapter. This is the next chapter of your life. You are that same person. That same person is still in you. Don't lose them. But now it's a new chapter. And it is a challenge because, it's our mother instinct. If we were to go back many, many thousands of years, our only role in our tribe was to look after others whilst the men went out and got food for us. It was a really simple life. Whereas today, life is more complex. There are more things going on, but we have more opportunities. So I think it's trying to keep things simple, trying to not overcomplicating life and accepting that we don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. And that we don't have to be perfect, because perfection's a myth, absolute rubbish. And that what we see on social media on Facebook isn't true. When we're comparing our behind the scenes to everybody else's glossy highlights, that's really toxic. So I think it's stay in your lane, sort of just focus on what makes you and your guys happy, find the wins when you can, and know that you are enough just as you are. And I think that's all mums need to hear that.
And now you've said it, they've heard it.
Good.
So
Yay.
there you go. So if there's someone who's listening to this who can relate to your story, like really relate to your story,
Yeah.
and they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with what to do next, what advice would you give them?
I'd always say take one day at a time, and find your tribe if you can. Find the people that get it, because you need those people around you for the good days as well as the bad days. And that can be, a local group, it can be an online group, but just find one or two people that truly get your position, because it helps with that feeling of isolation that's so common.
Now I'm going to ask two questions which have the number 3 in them.
Okay.
So the first one is, what 3 things, now that you can like reflect back on your life so far as a mother, what 3 things do you wish you knew before you became a mum?
Ooh, okay. 3 things I wish I knew. I think the first thing is that it's okay to struggle. It's okay if that maternal gushing instinct isn't there straight away, like it is for Beverly and down the ward, who's there nursing her baby and in the throes of elation. If you're not Beverly, that's fine. It's okay to struggle with it. I think perfectionism is a huge one as well. I wanted to be perfect for everybody, and actually their version of perfect was what I was showing up as anyway. It was me, as you've said, it was me that wanted to push all the time and be that bit better. So, stop trying to be perfect and just be you. That's 2. And then the third thing would be, I think, just to take one day at a time, because it's an overwhelming journey. And we can skip ahead to, will he ever drive? Or we can torture ourselves with the what ifs and the, where do we go here? And we spend such a lot of time worrying. I love, there's a quote that says, worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but gets you nowhere. And I go,
that's great. That's amazing. I love it.
That's exactly what worrying is. So I'd say worry less, be a little bit more present in life now, and just take that one day at a time. If I could go back in time, I would definitely say that to myself. And I'd give myself the biggest hug, because I think compassion is something we are so good at for other people. And yet we are terrible at self-compassion. So I would go back in time and I would give broken Charlie 17 years ago that huge hug, and I say, you have absolutely got this, I promise, but one day at a time, and be kind to yourself, please, is what I would say.
Do you know what? If we had a lot more kindness in the world to ourselves and to other people, this would be a different world. The world is lacking kindness.
Absolutely.
And the other question with a 3 in it is, what 3 things would you like our listeners to take away from this conversation today?
I would like them to remember not to trust everything they think, because we tell ourselves we're not good enough, or we tell ourselves we've done this wrong, we're terrible, she's so much better than me. So I would say, don't believe everything you think. I would say that if you find yourself in a life that's altered by your child's disability or additional needs, that yes, it's an altered life like ours, but it can still be an amazing one. It's not the end, it's a detour, certainly. But I like to say, even Tales of the Twist can have a happy ending. So you might be in the middle of your twist now thinking, my head's coming off, I don't know what to do with life, I don't know which direction we'll go in. And I would say, try to not to sit in that worry rocking chair too often, because we spend a lot of time worrying about the what ifs. And actually, when we get to the place that we were expecting it to be an issue, it's something completely different anyway. And we think, oh, okay. So for example, Harry's just gone to college. I've spent the last 10 weeks really quite nervous about him settling. He's doing really well. So all that worry and stress was for bugger all, So I would just say, yeah, maybe don't sit in that rocking chair too often or for too long.
Oh, now I know people who are listening to this, the ladies out there who are listening to this will be going, I need to be in Charlie's world. She sounds amazing. I want more of Charlie. Make it easy for them, Charlie. How can that happen?
Okay. There's 3 ways I would say. One is to email me. Just drop me an email on info@charliebeswick.com. The second way would be to follow us on Instagram, And so we are Our Altered Life, and there's a little link up there, and the link will take you to a ton of free resources. So I have ebooks, I have a newsletter, there's loads of resources there that have helped countless mums. And the third thing is that we have a community on Facebook called SEND, which in the UK stands for Special Educational Needs and Disability. Send gin and cheese, because they are my two saviours in life. So send gin and cheese are the three things that dominate my world. But also when you've had a really tough day, I'm literally emailing the husband, texting the husband, like, send me gin and cheese. It's been one of those days. So we've got an 1,100 strong community of mums that absolutely, truly get what it's like to live an altered life. And it's a beautiful community. So I'd say head over to there, answer the questions to come in, because privacy is really important to us in the group. And just join us and allow us to be your tribe.
Oh, see, I knew this was going to be an amazing conversation. So just to reiterate, and we will put the links in the episode description, you can email Charlie, you can follow Charlie on Instagram, and you can join her awesome community on Facebook. But don't worry, because we'll put the links in the chat and you just have to click. It's amazing. So we have come to the end of our episode today. Charlie, thank you very much for joining me and having a conversation about mum and mumdom. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast episode. And if you did, then of course, please share it with other mums. I have lots more resources for you that will help you on your journey through life. Just visit my website to access them, which is mummyonabreak.co.uk. You can also find out details about my book, Busy. Take care and see you the next time.